Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, it's hard to argue that when the dynamic shifts in a relationship that things can get complicated. And guess what? If you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more, in a light and in a conversational fashion. And, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because let's face it, you're listening. And if you are listening, keep listening and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, gives you a 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere. Places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe as well, we'd really appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, the Letterboxd, the Blue Sky, the Threads, the TikTok. I lose track. There's too many. But we're in the seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? We love to watch it and write about it and talk about it. We love it that much more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please do us that kindness, come on by and pay us a visit. Boy, oh boy, we've been holding on to this one for a while. It is in theaters, well, probably right now as we speak, this last day of January of 2025. But we're going all the way back to TIFF, an interview that we did with the one and only writer-director Sook-Yin Lee, and talking about her new film, Paying for It, which is really a fantastic portrait into the nature of relationship and just how the dynamic can change, because it's the story of this introverted cartoonist and his girlfriend, and she wants to redefine the relationship and see other people, and things are evolved. And in this process, he begins sleeping with sex workers and discovers a new kind of intimacy in the process. And it's an adaptation of the graphic novel by the one and only Chester Brown, who also happens to be Sook-Yin's ex. So there's a lot of personal realities in this story as well, which is what makes it relatable, funny, honest, and probably one of my favorite films of the past year. It really is a fantastic piece of work, Canadian work, that I cannot encourage you enough to go see. And like I said, if you're in Toronto, actually, and you're listening to this on January 31st when the film opens, I know Sook-Yin and her team are going to be at the Scotiabank for a Q&A for the 7 o'clock screening, I do believe. Check your local listings, but go see Paying for It. Go support Canadian cinema, because it's so important to see vital, fascinating, and really well done stories that are told from multiple angles, and it really gives a unique perspective on just not only the nature of sex work, but the nature of how we want to be able to consume stories. Because I mean, we talked with Sook-Yin back before the festival when this premiered, but also just in terms about the rise of micro cinema and the sort of the craving for honest storytelling, like this film is, in the sea of sequels and big gaudy things that are happening at our blockbusters as well. There needs to be both. Cinema needs them both. Cinema needs movies like Paying for It. So go support it. Check it out. Like I said, it is playing at the Scotiabank here in Toronto for at least a week. But first, enjoy our talk with Sook-Yin, because between you and me, it's a darn good one. One of my favorite ones of recent memory. So enjoy. But I mean, to kick it off, obviously, just thank you so much for the time today.
Yeah.
I mean, just congrats on this. I mean, I absolutely loved it. I mean, the last time we talked, you shot a movie in your house. It kind of feels fitting that this next movie, we're kind of branching out of the house.
But I also shot it in the house.
You did.
A lot of it's in the house, in that tiny little cramped space where Chester's little basement office / bedroom is, exactly where he once laid his head and worked.
No, I mean, I guess that brings the first question, like, what made you want to sort of combine his graphic novel with basically your story?
Well, I loved his graphic novel when it came out. And I immediately thought of the movie adaptation and asked him if I could do it. And because we're close, he had many people asking for that to make that into a movie, but he said that I could. Just because it's a really brilliant graphic novel that questions many ideas around romance and love and connection,
Mm.
and has a lot. It's very gristworthy, and there's a lot of honesty and political insight and interesting subject matter. Um, the decriminalization of sex work in his original graphic novel. And so I began just wanting to adapt it into a movie. But very soon, as I attempted to, I thought, oh, this is going to be easy peasy. It'll just go, from cartoon panel to cartoon panel. It was not easy. It became very clear to me that a graphic novel is very different from a comic book, although both are visual, sequential, visual storytelling. They're very different. I think novelists are able to sort of go into minutiae in ways that movies can't, and novels can meander and cover a lot of areas. But it became clear it was too episodic, and a movie needed a kind of like architecture of a movie, a kind of transformation of character, and a three-act structure was what I set out to do, but it was like a totally different form. So it really required some heavy thinking and many different versions of the script, because in his original book, the entire end fifth of the book is intellectual, academic, historic, political notes, because he's an egghead. And essentially, that graphic novel is a political treatise on the decriminalization of consensual sex work. Trying to take some of those ideas, wishing to support his story and reflect his story, but then also do my own thing because it's an adaptation. Turning that into a movie structure required some doing. As I said, there were many different incarnations, and it wasn't until I saw that. So basically, Chester and I were a romantic couple, are each other's families. We still are. When, after 4 years of being together, our sexual life sort of ended up sort of like most relationships, kind of ebbing off and to the cuddle zone, but still a lot of love. And I was extremely young, and I just gotten my job at Much Music, and he was a more retiring kind of nerdy introverted cartoonist who the antithesis of the kind of indie rock world that I was suddenly exposed to,
Right.
like as a VJ
Yeah.
on national TV. So had diametrically opposed sort of like lifestyles and work, but still immense love for one another and living together. And so when it came to a point where I was developing crushes on other people and, wanting to have those, like our relationship has been one of profound honesty. So it's like I told him, it wasn't any kind of like sneaking around behind. It was always in the conversation. And I was very lucky to have in Chester a friend and soulmate who delighted in having those kinds of conversations. So when it came time for us to kind of, when things were dwindling and we were deciding to, in the beginning, to open up the relationship from the West Coast, there's a lot of that going.
Right.
Only successful times that I know one successful couple, West Coast, who's opened up the relationship, very healthy. Anyway, that soon turned into a situation where I realized I was much more monogamously inclined than I thought. While he was celibate for a long time, and he needed to have sex, and he had no desire for a relationship, and he was terrible at flirting. Nothing could be more anxiety inducing than having to go out there and flirt with somebody for Chester. So for him, he found eventually the idea of exploring paid sex work, hiring a sex worker for consensual sex and paying her as a John. And that was the thrust of his graphic novel. There's so many different.
I won't go there, but I appreciate that.
That was a dad joke. And so it wasn't until I saw one day I was reading his book and I saw that he had seen a sex worker on my birthday. I was like, what? Oh my God. Here I have been trying to, because Chester wouldn't reveal any details about the women that he had seen.
Right.
nor reveal he revealed very few details about his friends and family. I am a character in his graphic novel, and he was trying to protect all of us. So it was a very myopically a journey of from his point of view, and quite literally, sometimes he had panels where the women's their faces were completely edited out, framed out.
Right.
And I said that it was impossible for me to do a movie like that, nor am I interested in doing a
Well,
movie
yeah.
like that. I need to imbibe the women with personalities and the sex workers with personalities and full-fledged humanity. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, shit, right. We were trying to be a couple, like we were navigating this world together in a tiny little row house. We were unable to break up. It was inconceivable. Even the word breakup was completely inappropriate or not within our vernacular. We knew that we wanted to stay living together, and we continued to stay living together for many, many years after that. But I thought, oh, this is an interesting thing. Two people in their search for loving connection, she from the more socially sanctioned and approved way of dating, albeit equally as harrowing,
Yeah.
and even more dangerous and difficult. And then Chester, a very shy guy, being bold enough to try to figure out what it is in that world. And then soon becoming, you know, knowing the women, and then getting the bird's eye view as a John of how incredibly the work that is involved, and also the few rights that sex workers are afforded in our society, and thus his perspective in his graphic novel about how to uplift those rights through decriminalization.
Well, for
Um,
sure.
the
Absolutely.
hope for that. And so I realized upon that, I was like, do you mind if I bring in a bunch of stuff that was happening for me and you in this context in the movie? And he was like, really? You want to? I'm like, yeah, I think this is the thing that can drive it. Because I didn't have very much I have no knowledge of Denise. Didn't have any knowledge of the women. So I didn't want to speak for them. And I have done sex work, tangential work, like my role in Short Bus.
Right. Right.
Although I'm not a bona fide sex worker. I have done sex work, tangential work, labor, and understood that, but I didn't feel comfortable to do to make the whole movie about Denise, which would seem to be, and that's the significant sex worker in Chester's life. That would seem to be the norm. You would the approach I think most filmmakers would want to do. But because he was lip sealed and I could not know anything about her, I had to imagine her, kind of create her based upon talks with other sex workers, mixed with imagination. But I had to kind of refocus it upon the love story between this couple, and how she goes one way and he goes the other, and how they navigate their separate journeys, and how that affects their relationship together. So that's how I kind of refocused it.
Well, and I mean, it's such an interesting dynamic too. I see, like, now that you're explaining it out, I mean, it all makes so much sense. I mean, it was those sort of Sex in the City diner moments that we'd have sort of with these exposition to sort of move everyone along on their various chains, which really made it fascinating for me to sort of follow both these characters. But I mean, I've got to ask, and I mean, this might be the most self-indulgent thing I'm ever going to ask, but how do you cast yourself? Because I mean, as an artist, as a creator, I've got to imagine basically casting yourself is probably one of the harder things you probably ever have to do.
Well, I'm lucky in that as a storyteller and as a filmmaker, I always turn to my life experience.
Right.
Every story has come from a seed of something that I have experienced. Even Octavio is Dead, the ghost story of my last film, was inspired by an intense relationship I had with the ghost of a dead poet in Barcelona, and I fictionalized it and turned it into something else. But it really was grounded in that experience. And so I don't have the same kinds of hangups. It's not like I'm very used to and have always told stories derived from and inspired from something that I experienced, saw, so as to give it to some kind of veracity. So I had I have an ability to kind of separate myself from the story. And I guess some people would think the worry would be you're too close and you can't actually see if it's a good story. For me, it's very clear There were many scenes that we shot with my character that I knew were getting in the way of the story. It was very easy for me to extricate them in the editing process, so I'm not precious about that. What I did want to do was honor Chester's graphic novel memoir, and then also make a good movie. So trying to find, I knew that she had to be spunky. She needed to come from sort of an alternative arts community. I knew my own story and some of the psychological needs and difficulties that, you know, push this character Sonny forward. As you saw, her name is not Sook-Yin. Chester is Chester because I pretty much honor how he depicted himself in his graphic novel. But with me, I took more liberties in terms of storytelling. So her name is not Sook-Yin, her name is Sonny, and it is a work of autofiction. My friend Jordan Townhill calls it a double act of portraiture. So yeah,
I'd go with that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there are so many. It's a very strangely wrought film in that the movie takes place in the house of which the real life events unfolded. And I'm directing it. And I was thinking, kind of cousin to this movie is a fantastic movie that I just discovered on YouTube. It's called Outrageous, and it's from 1974. It's a Canadian film. It's starring Craig Russell, who is a masterful drag queen. And it was based on a memoir written by his real life ex-roommate. And they made it into a movie, and he's essentially playing a version of himself based on a memoir. But it is a film and a fictional film. So there are precedences beforehand that are a kind of combination of those things. But it was difficult to cast the character who plays kind of a version of me, Sonny, and very difficult to cast Chester. And not because it was hard for me to identify who is me, but more like the lack of people with actors with that touch. So I saw hundreds of actors for both of those roles, and only two imbibe Chester with what I feel are Chester's qualities. And he's very humanistic, very generous, caring, thoughtful, intelligent, a very logical person, and a sprite. He's a magical being. And so most of the people, those same lines, they imbibed those lines with a kind of roughness or a kind of masculinity that made them really unappealing to me. Amazing to see those same scenes spoken by different people, not nailing it all. You must find actors who embody the spirit of the film and the person. And same with I saw a lot of very talented actors for the role for Sonny, very gorgeous, physically beautiful people, but many of them didn't have the right touch. They were maybe perhaps more of the Hallmark acting school, and I think that the industry demands that style, so people assume that that's what directors want. And what I wanted was somebody funny, flawed, kind of spirited, and fun, and also alternate person from the world, from the post-punk alternative scrappy underground. And you can't kind of fake that stuff. And actor Emily Lay is from that world, so she understands that world. She doesn't have to feign that or act that. She's quite different from me in that she's much more grounded, and she wasn't around, she was just a baby during the events of this movie. So I really had to describe to her what Much Music was, what the Halifax Pop Explosion was. And luckily I had like all the source material in my imagination, and also from I gave all of the key creative people and the lead actors files and files of like archival photographs of Chester and I. I could give the art director or the production designer, what his workspace looks like, so they could look at that. I gave them Sonny and Chester have Mo, their pet dog, a beloved member of their family. They love to, he rides around in a box and he's like lifted in the air and moved around a room. And so that's what Chester and I did with our cat Oscar. And I could show the production designer, so here's a photo of the box. And she made it. So it was nice to have that Rolodex of real life things in order to give, I guess, specificity and imbibe the world with a kind of emanation of truth from those spaces, from the actors and also the locations, many of which were, I decided to kind of like find spaces in real life that to me felt like those spaces. And then the production department would come in and kind of primp them and augment them slightly, but essentially embrace what the emanations were. Because when you watch a documentary and you see a spectacular space, it's just amazing that no one could confabulate that. So I knew that I wanted to, given our limitations on budget and given the tall order, things like surrendering my house to an entire cast and crew that like shooting here was necessary, and I think helped to give veracity to the film.
How important was it for you to, I mean, I'm looking for the right way to word this, because something I really appreciated was that the sex was very much decarnalized. It wasn't about sort of the carnality of it. It was just very much functionality. Like, you're still having nudity, there's still stuff going on, but it's not about the sex. It's just about sort of the function thereof. How important was
Yeah.
it for you to really kind of strip that away and just make it sort of a function of these characters' lives?
Yeah, for sure. Well, again, I there were many clues in Chester Brown's graphic novel. He's always he often has a wider detached
Mm.
quality. Oftentimes, the scene will begin, at the top of the ceiling, looking down on the bed. They're just little figures moving around on the bed. There's nothing glamorized whenever in the bed. We're not ever inside or pointing at particular erogenous
Right.
zones. It's very matter of fact. It's like kind of like National Geographic. We are human beings, and the animal kingdom, to proliferate itself and to have fun, we have sex. But it wasn't, I wasn't interested in glamorizing or seducing the audience. It's like, let's just see it. Similar to the nudity. So I feel that tell strange love stories. All of my movies, I feel like, are love stories, but not in a typical romantic way, but they're about love and connection and the desire for human connection. And I knew that there would be, nudity in the film, but I was also aware that we've seen nudity from female nudity, forever.
Mm.
And what is a bit more radical is male full frontal. So the only full frontal is actually Dan. And Dan was the ultimate collaborator because he was right from the get-go willing to do full frontal. He even said, I'll shave my head if you want me to. And I was like, no need, Dad, that's okay. But full frontal was really key. And that is still radical, oddly enough. Like,
Yeah.
we're now living in a day and age where seemingly everything's out there. But when you really look closely, say, for example, in Euphoria, where apparently there's a lot of cock, but people don't know that those cocks are prosthetic, and
Yeah.
the actors have asked for perfectly formed penises. So what you're seeing is the most perfect, impeccable penis. And let's face it, when you're just walking around scratching your nuts when you wake up and walking across to go to the shit on the shitter, it's shriveled and it's not, and it ain't pretty. So I think that is the most shocking for people to see, in all of its basic natural manner, what that is. And so in the minds of the audiences, they're like, oh my God, that was a lot. But I'm like, it's not a whole lot. It's actually a wide shot, and the guy is just walking across the room. And so it's funny that we're still so, in general, kind of removed and separated from our bodies, and there's still such a great kind of mystery and disconnection with our bodies. And so when we see a movie like Paying for It, I think I realized that it was the most radical thing that I could do is actually show a full frontal of a man, you know, walking across his bedroom in the morning, you know.
Because I mean that's
Um,
it's always fascinated me just as a man. Whenever I hear stories in the news of celebrity X, Y, or Z got busted for sending a dick pic, I'll just look down and go, "Why? It's not
yeah,
that gentle," you know?
yeah. So you know, it's interesting that though, you know, there is more seeming graphic material out there, but it's still within a context that is either overly inflated or unattainable and perfected or ridiculously erogenated. So it's like super sex on wheels. You know,
Yeah,
I wasn't interested in that, and I was interested in a more kind of way in which we really know our bodies and try in our clumsy attempts to um, have physical intimacy with another.
for sure. No, I mean, I gotta ask because, like you said, this is a fictionalized version, and I mean, this isn't you. This is, this is adjacent to you. But I always enjoyed watching you on Much Music back in the
Yeah.
day. But at the same time, even back then, I always knew you were kind of the square peg in the round hole. Like one of these things, and there didn't quite belong. Like, was it cathartic for you to sort of have these more sort of moments of ennui, sort of recreating because I mean, to me, those were probably the more funnier bits in the entire film.
Well, I just, it's so funny. People still remember I went and bought a coffee from a new coffee place, and the woman was like, "Oh my God, I loved you on Much Music. Remember that time that you talked about eating chicken's feet?" Chinese people eat chicken.
Right.
She was Asian. And then you started eating your own foot. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? I did so many weird things because there was just hours to fill. And to me, as a young person, it was the ideal job. I mean, I came up through music and filmmaking and was just like a scrappy kid doing weird art and stuff. And then Moses Znaimer discovered me and threw me on TV. And he was very much like a Marshall McLuhan-esque lover of like it's the process that counts and throw people that are kind of left to sink or swim on air and see what they do. And we watch them grow as the audience. And so there is something very amazing. I so much of my early Much Music experience entirely informed my worldview as a broadcaster and as an artist about process being key. And yeah, some of those ideas of improvisation and rule breaking, and rock and roll. And so the trajectory of my character, I saw sort of the early days of like when punk broke, right? When suddenly Sonic Youth is on mainstream television and Nirvana is the what is this weird shit? Mudhoney is on regular what?
Right, right.
And that was like that's why they hired me because I was like that was legit. Moses caught wind of some of my stuff and he's like, "Hey, do you want to come over here?" I'm like, "Who are you?" He's like, "Okay, all right, I'll try it. Try anything." And I came over and it was really a fun job. It was weird. It was very sci-fi to suddenly
Right.
be thrown into this steel eyeball of a camera. But I had seen all that exciting kind of like the Halifax pop explosion, the Calgary post-punk explosion. Being from Vancouver prior to Much Music that was like epicenter. Like grunge came out like Vancouver totally in what was happening in Vancouver and completely informed the grunge movement. There's a whole Pacific Northwest world of like freaky art and multidisciplinary stuff. So Pointed Six, like they're a godhead to a West Coaster, and I reached out and they knew me, and I had knew people who knew the band, and they gave me their work to be able to showcase. I wanted to show some of those wonderful bands that were crucial to Canadian, the burgeoning underground scene, like Josh Hermit, Halifax. Ian lives just over across the. I'm like, Ian, can I use your video? He lives just outside that window. And
Yeah.
so my neighbor, and so I could dial into all these people. Cub were my peers. Robin Iwata is the younger sister of Randy Iwata, who runs Mint Records, who's been around forever, who puts out my albums. So in my experience of Much Music, I was part of that wow, exciting time, and so stoked to introduce like independent bands who went on to like all these kids were riveted to their TVs because there was no internet, or the internet that we had was really slow and clunky.
Yeah, exactly.
Netscape, dialing up Netscape. So yeah, then being at Much Music, I was there for I think 6 years, and I saw the rise of the prefabricated band and
Right.
the packaged sort of boy band. They kind of like became huge. So that trajectory of things becoming further corporatized, the underground to corporate arc that we saw not only at Much Music, but in the comic book world, right? The comic world, the world of graphic novels. That's so much of our world. So I wanted to eke out that arc. So we see in Sonny's character, the kind of underground thing, but then also the more corporatization of that world.
The 98
Um,
degrees sort of
that was really fun.
yeah, angle, and yeah, no, for sure, yeah.
And that sort of ripples through the rest of the movie in different aspects, in different contexts. And then like I said, the movie was done on a very small budget, and I called up my old mentor, Moses Neimer, and he's one of the few guys with a movie studio that might let me through his door, and he gave us the space, his studio. It looked different, and we had to change it a bit because they were having a Marilyn Lightstone variety show that was much more boomer looking.
Right,
And
right.
so they said, okay, if you don't move anything, you can be here over the weekend, but don't move anything. And then my art department, they're like, and most of my crew are really young. They're in their 20s and 30s. And they're like, okay, oh shit, this is going to be a tall order. How are we going to work with? I'm like, don't worry. We're just we could get some. They constructed some artwork that we could put over top the Maryland limestone jukeboxes
Right.
that were more like spray painted graffiti. And I said, Much Music, the semiotic look of Much Music is very easy to achieve. All you need is an exposed brick wall, a ladder leaned up against the exposed brick wall, and two lights, beams of light with different gels, purple and blue or green and orange, sort of arcing up against that brick wall. Get me a carpeted wedge that we all just sat on when we did our throws, and voila, that's the look. And they're like, oh, okay,
You
okay,
throw
cool.
in a TV with a tube in it, and you're golden. Yeah.
Done, 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 done. So we could transform that quite easily. I shouldn't say that.
Absolutely.
I'm sure it was like it was a major, intense undertaking for Olivia, our production designer. But yeah, that was super fun to do. I mean, to see it, and it really is just like small iconic elements. Two beams of light, different colored gel,
Mm.
exposed brick wall, ladder against the brick wall, carpeted wedge to sit upon, large ass TV. But you're there. You're in Much Music.
Well, and I mean, I love that you told that story, just because I mean, it really does speak to sort of the power of relationships in this business, which so many people tend to forget about. And I mean, I'm just to start putting a bow on this because I'm curious. Obviously, you're an actor, you're a filmmaker, you're a composer, you're a musician. How important has it been for you throughout this entire arc to sort of stay diversified? Because I mean, I just saw Darkest Miriam. I was so happy. Oh, hey, Sook-Yin's in this. Oh, that's fun. Just to have you pop up and be able to do different kind of things.
I mean, it's necessary. I studied it under Brian De Palma. He was our kind of our marshal at a kind of it was called the TIFF. When it's bring in emerging filmmakers,
Mm.
and they're there for the whole duration of the festival, and they get to talk and be students and hear from directors. Well, he was our marshal with us every day, and he was a really interesting guy who shared tons of
Well, I'm
experiences.
sure, yeah.
And he was like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Have a lot of stuff going on because you never know what's going to go. And so, and I'm a multi-person. I actually think of myself, and much of my methodology is that of the world of a musician. Many people didn't know that I was a musician before going to Much Music, and still continue to do music and play music and perform music. So I tend to be a person that loves to express myself in many different forms. And I do find that each of those forms, um, they inform one another. So even the when you construct a set list, a sequence of songs, when you do a concert, that has everything to do with editing. Um, my work as a broadcaster, I feel that they all hover around the same energy, and that is the hope that you, in your form, get to the heart of it, get to the heart of the matter of your inquiry, and um, and then in the world of art, that you make something that is good, that is also getting to the heart of the inquiry, that is entertaining. And for me, I like to there's always an emotional resonance and hit the heart, head, and funny bone. I tried to do a drama with Octavio is Dead, and it was a drama, but it had comedic moments.
Mm.
Um, like I come from a, my dad grew up in World War II as an orphan. My mom grew up during the Communist Revolution. Intense experiences. My own story is very intense, and much like many people who go through that kind of intensity, there's a big sense of humor. Like life is you got to have it because it fucking
Sure.
saves you each time. You got to be able to laugh. And so yeah, so I liked and it kind of reflects my experience of life, that kind of combination of emotions. So I mean, to your question, I cannot help but be chronically interested in many forms. I love being a student and constantly learning. The only two forms that I haven't really done and that are challenging are stand-up comedy, and I'm a terrible rapper. Um, but I did try my hand at stand-up comedy still. And it was I think I have to work on that one.
And I
Um,
mean, it's one of those things where and I mean, I almost find it hard to word this properly. And I remember saying something similar to Brandon Cronenberg about Infinity Pool. And after watching your film, this to me felt like the most commercially accessible, yet still true to who you are as a storyteller film that you've ever done.
oh wow.
Because again, it's one of those things where it's genuinely funny, it's genuinely awkward, but you're still keeping true to sort of your artistic voice and your sort of tone and tenor of how you tell stories. And I mean, in watching it, I thought this was a beautiful thing. And I mean, I don't mean that sort of as a dig or an insult. Like to me, this is fantastic because when you can sort of meld being true as an artist and manage to make a buck or two at it, that's the goal, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's harder and harder to do these days. I think that being an artist is really truly a spiritual calling because we ain't making money.
Yeah.
I just like yesterday. So Dylan and I have this other crazy movie that like we made two movies in lockdown and we just
Right.
premiered one of them. And we had two sold out shows at Eyesore Cinema, and we performed them. We did a performance of music, screened the movie, did a Q&A, and then did karaoke, a full meal deal, both nights packed. And the Daniel who at Eyesore was like, "Do you guys have any swag?" We're like, "Shit, no." And so for the second night, that day we are like, let's make some, like, there's so much music here. Let's burn some CDs. So it was literally going back to my earliest days in art as an artist, where we would find stuff and make stuff, like make our own pins by finding a bunch of pins somebody threw out in the garbage and spray painting it over and making our own pins
I
and
love it.
selling them. And so there we were, making original art for each cover. And I had a CD burner. He's like, "Oh my God, I haven't used one of those since ever." Like, you still have a CD burner? And I managed to get it working, and it worked. And we packaged 10 CDs, and in 5 minutes they were all gone. And I'm like, "Oh my God, it's so hard to make money, but you can if you turn to like DIY styles, which progressively more and more artists are being forced to do.
Yeah.
And so there is a kind of, um, we also the cost of living. It makes it also impossible to be an artist. So to be an artist, you got to be pretty scrappy and kind of crazy to continue that area. But I'm completely unemployable in any other aspect. So I have to do this, and I love to do this. I think maybe what it is in terms of relatability, you're saying. I think because everything, and I learned this from broadcasting, when I every day would park myself on the street and ask strangers if I could hear about events in their lives. And many of them opened up to me, and all of them had extraordinary life experiences that you could not replicate or even dream up. And the veracity of documentary film and just getting a glimpse of the true lives of like what people experience is profoundly amazing. And that we're discouraged to talk about those perspectives. I was very lucky to have a role in media where I would people would share their life experience, and wow. So I think what's happening there, I mean, storytellers, the more general you are, the more unrelatable it is. It becomes like kind of like a blob. Whereas the more specific you are in terms of like each of those encounters that my character Sonny had come from a real place and imbibed by real details as I remember them,
Yeah.
which are ridiculous and wild,
They are.
but truly happened. They're even more wild. Like I said, I had to cut a bunch of stuff out because it wasn't really contributing to them together.
Right.
But there was nutty, bonkers stuff that I did. And so I think that everyone else does those kind of bonkers stuff too. So if you're able to like reflect that, then people go, oh my God, so know that. You know what I mean? So, I mean, in storytelling, it is the being specificity that allows it to be universal.
No, amen
So,
to that. Amen to that. But I mean, just to wrap it up, burn a few DVDs of deleted scenes because I think you'll be able to move them at the premiere because that's a given. But just keep throwing shit against the wall. I love what you do, and I love keep seeing that to just keep up the good work and just again, hopefully I run into you on the Warpath during the festival and just thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
yeah, I appreciate all of your support because like we're doing this and we need people like you to watch it, appreciate it, and spread the word. I think there are people who are hungry for good work and want, as we see as the rise of the micro cinema and the repertory cinema, there is a whole generation that wants to understand and see better stuff that they're being offered by the big wigs.
Amen to that, sister. Talk to you again soon.
Yeah, okay. Take good care.
All right, bye.
Bye.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.